We were very bullish on growth in general, without fully thinking it through, not out of stupidity, just out of naivety.
He's a detailed, obsessed MD who's been very instrumental at driving Soar Group's growth over the last 5-6 years. He's also founder of Calm Collective. Please welcome to the pod, the MD of Soar, Matt Lewis.
Yeah, employee number one.
By us optimizing stuff like making sure the team are incredibly happy in their roles, doing less better means that they are empowered to do the best possible work for the brand.
It was such a pivotal moment in the year.
The process that we run there brings a lot of discipline and it brings a lot of quality to our strategy, and I think it's a big contributor to how we grow, but it's also something that we've done wrong and imperfectly at times.
You can provide that infrastructure and the process, but ultimately you need great people to execute on it. It's something that is so essential to just supporting where the business is going, where any business is going.
Yeah, I think to distill that down, it's transparency.
We wouldn't have got to where we are without the work and processes that you've brought to the companies.
Didn't you decline the job offering first? Is that right?
It did actually. Yeah. Your intel says you're right, Luke.
Welcome back to another episode of D2C Diaries. Today, we have a guest who is as comfortable running spreadsheets and forecasts as he is walking his dog. He's a true grassroots operator, a detailed, obsessed MD who's been very instrumental at driving Soar Group's growth over the last 5-6 years. He's also founder of Calm Collective, and he's a freak in the sheets. Google Sheets, that is. Please welcome to the pod, the MD of Soar, Matt Lewis.
God, that was some intro. Wow. I'm glad we decided you were going to take that. Yeah, employee number one. Been here since the origin, the whole journey. So it's a pleasure to have you on finally. It's long overdue.
Long overdue.
Well, that was a fantastic introduction, Lucas. Did not expect that at all.
Been planning that for weeks.
Hey guys, very quick one. Our sponsors at Wayfly are offering our listeners 25k in upfront capital for a 1.8k on the run up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday to give you a boost when you need it most. Imagine this, your ads are finally dialed in, CPAs are down, AOV is up, and you can feel the momentum building. But then you run into unexpected costs, which I'm sure we've all seen. Your ad budgets are nearly capped, and your next move, the one that could turn a good month into a fantastic month, depends on cash that isn't landing for another 2 weeks. This is how Wayflyer helped brands like Wild, True Classics, Doc and Bay, to name a few, achieve growth with funding when they actually need it. They're giving ambitious D2C brands $25,000 in upfront capital for $1,800 total cost in the run up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday. That's a 1.2% per month over 6 months. No equity, no hidden fees, just fuel to move when it matters most. So you can double down on what's working, scale your best performing ads while they're still pumping, stay stocked. As we know, stock can be an issue during this period, so reorder your fastest movers before they sell out, and move fast, right? Connect Shopify or Amazon and get approved in hours, not weeks. Timing is everything. Often, the brands that win aren't the ones with the biggest balance sheets. They're agile and ready to act when the window opens. So go to the link in the description and get $25,000 in your account next week from the brand that helps you fund your favorite brands.
Yeah, obviously, I guess wanted to start by touching on the journey you've been on with us. I think just so everybody who's watching is aware, before we dive into some real meaty stuff around agency operations, the learnings we've taken this year that are informing our strategic approach to 2026, and then hopefully how that can translate to many of the e-com brands listening and what lessons they can take, hopefully, from how we're operating our business and how we're thinking about strategy. But yeah, you were the first team member, weren't you, all the way back in 2019, I think?
I think it was just after that, wasn't it, or 2020? I was thinking about this on the train down. It was like...
it's all a blur.
Yeah, it was a blur. I know I started freelancing a bit, or taking... you were very kind enough to entrust in me to sort of take on the first couple of clients, or just sort of give me that opportunity to sort of take on a few clients that you and Joe got in the early days. And then it all sort of spiraled from there, didn't it? And then it eventually sort of transitioned to full time.
I remember meeting you in a Costa in Tad.
I remember that.
in a summer break between uni years. And that's where the first kind of conversation came from. And then I think at one point I was running 20 ad accounts, which probably doesn't sound good. We don't do that anymore. Just to be clear, that's definitely not how we run Capacity.
Pre-AI as well.
Yeah, it was, but that was in the days when you could just run like lookalikes. It was like, it wasn't easy, but it was significantly less complicated.
You'd just be in the ad account, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
and just looking at numbers. That's all it was.
Didn't you decline the job offering first? Is that right?
It did actually. Yeah. Your intel says you're right, Luke. Yeah. I don't know what it was. I think it was very early days, wasn't it? It was at the time I considered it still sort of a risk because I went through university, and then you sort of trained during that time to sort of like look for a sort of grad job. And then I was kind of in that mindset, I think, back then. And that's why I initially declined it. That's such a negative word. I don't think I declined it. I was very interested still. And then it just like 2 or 3 months into the job, obviously I left and then came back.
Yeah, you also had a really good opportunity from a grad perspective. Like, was it EY?
It was PwC.
PwC, yeah. So it's like, yeah, I think I would have seen it as a risk, I think, at that stage, because we were very, very early. But then it was great that you did come back and join. And it's been a whirlwind ride from there in the most positive sense of that term. More of like a rocket ship, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've gone from 3 people to like nearly 80 people, I guess, across a group. So I think it's interesting that you've been there for the full journey. I always see you as the stoic leader that operates in the background and just makes things tick in many ways. And much of the business, I just don't think we'll be able to we wouldn't have got to where we are without the work and processes and things that you've brought to the company. So excited to dive into a lot of that through this episode.
Nice, appreciate that. It's been such an incredible journey as well, hasn't it? I think for all of us, just like all of us going on that journey, like it's so rare, or just becoming more appreciative of like how rare that is to go on as a journey and just like through your life. So yeah, it's been incredible so far.
For sure. Yeah. So maybe let's just start, looking back before we look forward. What, there's lots of lessons we've had across the group this year. I think a lot that are relevant and can apply to D2C brands and founders listening as well. What would you say, Matt, is one of the biggest learnings you feel we've had over the course of 2025?
I think one of the biggest learnings that I've definitely had, and I think we'd all probably like share this as well, is we were too focused on potentially like growth and the numbers at all costs sort of thing, and going about that the wrong way, if that makes sense. So more growth at all costs and like not understanding like how that should be translated across the team for the team to be fully bought in. I think that's sort of like lessons that we made very, very early on and have since corrected. So I'd say that's probably the first one, I would say.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that kind of almost ties into us having a bit of a refresh on culture and almost like re-anchoring, the why of what we're doing. I know we went through a big process of resetting all of our culture pillars and our mission, which was a really interesting process to go through, and then how we tied that into the operations and what we do on a day-to-day basis. I guess, big learning from my side was that previously we maybe had culture pillars or values and they weren't as embedded into what we do in the day-to-day and how that affects behaviors. But I think a big thing that I learned was just around the idea that, a lot of leaders will set a mission and values within a business, but it was from that 7, what's the book? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where they were talking there about the idea that great mission and values are built from within the bowels of the organization. So we really tied our whole team into resetting those culture pillars, where we did a whole day. We brought everyone together. We ran through what great mission and values look like and almost set a task where people would break into groups and actually come up with a mission that aligned with maybe some of the core themes that we put forward. And by doing so, we were able to get real buy-in and come to a position where we were able to all build that together versus just, as it describes in the book, the C-suite just setting values and culture behind their wooden desks in the boardroom, which I thought was a really interesting process to go through. And I think as a result of that, it's really helped instill those behaviors across the business.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was such a pivotal moment in the year, wasn't it? Or like the actual day that we did for that, and like how the whole team came together in that room. You could just like sort of feel the energy and like the shared passion for what we do. And I also think there was a part of that we kind of, with Soar and Ham becoming closer as a team, like up to that point, we didn't have shared values, did we? We didn't have a shared mission statement. We kind of did, but it was just adopted, sorry. So just being able to redo that with the whole team, and sort of like come together, that's set the course for the remainder of the year for sure.
I think what we've then done is like, and we were doing this previously to a degree, but I think a lot of businesses then set those, especially from a culture perspective. But I think it's how you use them through decision making, through process. And for us, we always kind of looked at them as like, how do we use them internally for how like team communication, hiring process, but how do they also translate externally to our way of servicing clients and providing a product to the market that also aligns with those culture pillars. So whether that's marketing output, whether that's direct every interaction with a client in Slack or on a call, it's like making sure that all of our behavior at every single touch point through internal and external engagements is really aligned to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just think that philosophy around getting buy-in first is so important. I think that's another mistake we've made this year, where we've made such a massive instrumental change to the way that people are working in their day-to-day without almost bringing them into that process, making them feel like they're a part of that process, and that they have an opportunity to give feedback, to support, to get it to the point where it needs to be, especially if it's something that's going to really impact the way that they are going to be working every single day. So I think that's a massive learning, just in terms of if you're, changing anything to do with operations that's going to, adapt the way that people are going to be working day to day, bring them into that process before just pushing something out to the business.
Yeah, 100%. That can be, you just applied across everything, isn't it? And it feels like it's one of those things that like it's kind of intangible, isn't it? You can't feel it, you can't like track it, you can't fully truly measure it, but it's something that is so essential to just supporting where the business is going, where any business is going. Because it's just like, yeah, as you say, Luke, it's just like the way you do things.
I think it's also it's that feedback. That's a process of gathering feedback as well when you're involving a team in a significant change, whether that's culture, whether that's process, whether that's a way of working, or whether that's like a strategic change. I think when you're bringing the people who are going to be executing on that into that process as early as possible, that feedback is so invaluable. And I think it always leads to a better outcome for the team.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's obviously probably one of our most instrumental changes in terms of values, is that kind candor piece, which is empowering people to give open, honest and direct feedback where it matters, that idea of kind, not nice. And I think having as many touch points for that feedback as possible across the organization is so important.
And I think feedback is a gift, but it's something that needs to be earned through the lens of having like a framework to apply that. You obviously did a really good session on how like on that theory of like we call it the SOAR framework, obviously, for giving feedback, but then it's how it's on management and leaders to receive that feedback, accept it, or explain why maybe they don't disagree if that is the case, because you don't always have to accept that feedback, and then close that loop. So like, how have you then taken that, implemented a change, or looked into the root cause and come back to the individual that's given that in the first place? Closing that feedback loop then like will encourage that action in the future. And I think that's where a lot of operators probably don't do that with enough intention, and therefore feedback won't be as forthcoming. And I think feedback loops are just such a driver of business progression, whether that's data and ads, whether that's from your team, whether that's from customers. Like, a lot of what drives business innovation and improvement is feedback in some format, but you have to earn it from the people who are giving it.
Yeah, 100%. I think you see that all the time. It's, you know, it's the behaviors that model, you know, it's that thing of show, don't say. And you might be really promoting the idea of driving feedback up and down the organization, but I think, as you say, the biggest problem you see there is you will take that feedback and not do anything with it. And even if you don't agree with it, it's about, as you say, closing that loop and giving context as to why we can't do something, because then that validates that they're doing the right thing by giving the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, otherwise, like, so we truly believe that, and this is the case, like, if you don't, then it just compounds further down the line for an even more difficult conversation, doesn't it? And that's just one area that any, you know, agency, brand, just any business that anyone is running, like, you've got that duty to make sure that the people within that team and in your team are progressing and are learning and are developing in their careers, and that's just one of the most powerful ways to do that.
Exactly. I want to come back to the piece you mentioned, you both touched on very start, is this period through sort of end of Q2, early Q3, when as a business we were growing. We were growing client base, we were growing revenue, we were actually seeing like margin compression, and I think there's multiple reasons for that. I think that we can touch on, but what we've implemented at the start of this year across the group was this kind of like methodology for like strategic planning and forecasting, basically, which I think if we look back to 2014. We were doing, but we weren't doing with as much intention, certainly in Soar. And I think that probably wasn't something you were really doing to that extent in the Hamby business unit. And I think the way we did that process has evolved a lot over this year. And I'd love to touch on some of those learnings, but it certainly felt like we did that process and we were intentional about it, but we probably overlooked certain things like the need to grow and really intentionally grow client value so we can increase wage progression in our team, so we can bring in better talent, so we can service better businesses, so we can continue to grow the business. I'd just love to dive into that as a way of working, because I think the process that we run there brings a lot of discipline and it brings a lot of quality to our strategy, and I think it's a big contributor to how we grow, but it's also something that we've done wrong and imperfectly at times, and I feel like we've all learned as operators through that lens throughout 2025.
Yeah, I think to kick off that conversation, it's like, you're right, Ollie. It was like the first time we properly did it, wasn't it, with any real structure in like early for 2025, and maybe from not having that sort of like view previously, or like following that process previously, we were very bullish on growth in general, like revenue growth, profitability growth, like just generally like look to a forecast, think what we'd love to achieve this. Let's sort of set it, sort of thing, without fully thinking it through, not out of stupidity, just out of naivety. And that sort of, that was probably the start of that process, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like it's almost like we became too quantitative with the data, which is very important, but then almost as a result of that, we lost the qualitative aspects of what actually goes into that data, which is not. It's still really important, because there are obviously a lot of nuances to how you reach those numbers and stuff that you definitely need to take into consideration as part of that process.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well as part of, I'm just trying to think of an example for that. It's like one example, one more recent example, I guess, and we can sort of like go back to the start of 2020. It was we're obviously looking to like partner with brands who are a lot like a stronger fit for our ICP, but also like our services and who we truly believe we can drive the most value for. And by doing that, we've got to be a bit more strict in terms of like who we brought on. And we went on that journey from, early this year to sort of like mid to where we are now. And I think as part of that, it's like kind of like an e-commerce brand, right? It's like growing your AOV, and like naturally you've got to do that as you grow the business. But obviously it comes with having to provide more value. But just trying to think of an example with that, it's like it's not inspirational at all to the team to just be like, we want to grow AOV, basically. So it's like how you think about that is an example is it's fewer clients who will be onboarding. So onboarding obviously takes time and a lot of energy, and so there'll be sort of like less frequent onboardings. You'll have more time to be able to like go deeper into the clients and like spend more time on clients and like be more strategic and really think about driving growth and how we're going to drive growth through creative, through paid. And that's like how you sort of transcend that objective, I guess, through the org.
Yeah, and I think that communication piece is really important. It's looking at how it's like forecasts for service businesses are fairly simple. Like you've only got a few variables to play with, right? You've got average client value or volume of clients. And I think when we were looking at the start of the year, I think it's because of how we've grown the business. We've obviously bootstrapped it from a point of like us doing the work directly ourselves to hiring a team to where we are now. And it's like probably didn't appreciate the pricing power we had and the ability to how we'd progressed up market as a provider, and the result we almost like had this like understated view of how much value we were driving to clients, and we weren't able to we didn't make those decisions fast enough, and then that contributed to, I think, the wrong approach to revenue growth through the lens of too much volume and not enough quality. And I think that decision then trickles down into so many different, manifests in so many different ways across the team, like the work we do, the decisions we make, and ultimately like the impact we're able to drive. And I feel like people in a workplace really want to feel like they are having a meaningful impact on brands, and they're able to really drive value to the clients that we're working for. And I feel like that strategic pivot just had such a dramatic impact on the second half of this year, and hopefully something that we're going to take forward into next.
Yeah, 100%. It's that. And then I think another example is like, when you're tunnel vision on chasing a top line, but then you forget the other things that do contribute to that top line monthly recurring revenue, such as like employee NPS, because the happier people are in a business, the better they're going to execute and the more impact they're then going to drive for the business as a result. Team utilization as well, like keeping that at around an 80% versus 100%, where we aren't going to be retaining the clients because we're not giving them the best possible service. So I think by us optimizing stuff like making sure the team are incredibly happy in their roles, doing less better, and keeping utilization to a point of 80% means that they are empowered to do the best possible work for the brands, which in turn drives that top line through retention.
Yeah, agreed. There's also it's also like another thing that came to mind there is sort of like how you evolve the people within the team, because obviously like that growth of sort of client value, I guess, the value that we're giving clients, value we're getting in exchange is going to come with like the team have to progress at that same rate, right? It's the same in every business. So a lot of emphasis placed around training processes, training materials, and just making sure that we're really evolving our hiring process to make sure that we're finding the sort of best possible talent that we can get. And that ties into like your point, Loukas, just around like the core values in the mission statement, and just making sure that that's constantly sort of integrated into that process. Yeah,
we've definitely been like, I've been thinking a lot this year, how do you like operationalize curiosity and creativity, which is very hard to do in many ways. Like you have to want to on a team level, but that curiosity, obviously radical curiosity is one of our values, but I think the one thing I've seen just with talent is like the best people are the ones that are just radically curious about the market, the brands they're working on. They truly live and breathe this space. And there's I think that comes through the consistent training sessions. It comes through the vehicles that we've created to with context sharing and learning from data across the business. And I think that's definitely something that going into next year that I'm going to continue exploring more and more, because I think it's at least for the creative team, those two elements are so important.
It's one of my favorite things to ask people on interviews is like, where are you learning from? Like, what are your sources of learning? I always find that if they're in niche communities, if they're really engaged on, say, certain Twitter is a big part of D2C, it's like such a leading indicator of their like mindset and their like interests. And I think that they're just like an embodiment of growth mindset, because they're actively seeking like innovative content that can drive their learning, which drives progress for them and obviously progress for our clients off the back of that.
For sure. Anything else on lessons before we go into looking forward?
Probably be good to touch on like the internal communication sort of systems and areas that we've really picked up, because that's been like more or less completely new this year, hasn't it? Not new, but the way that we've been thinking about it. I think you brought that up, Olly.
Yeah, I like speak to a lot of agency owners through like, we obviously do some consulting, we do some, and like have helped, just got a lot of agency owners in our network. And I always try and back down like, what are the things that really drive outlier returns or outlier growth in an agency business? And I think a lot of that often comes down to the things that are like less sexy from an outside perspective, like less of like the marketing, less of like the client case studies, and a lot of it is like the business operations and like and I think communication ties into that. But I also think that's something that you've had a really instrumental role on implementing in our business from the very start. Like we touched on it in the episode with Jack last week, where we brought in OKRs as a method of like setting objectives and priorities at a management level, probably way earlier than we probably needed to. I think it built like the right discipline and approach to that. I also think the way that we implemented like team reviews and a lot of focus on HR processes and how we intentionally develop people. Like a lot of our best people have progressed from within the organization, right? And then I think this internal communication was like the next evolution of that. And I think we're still in the process of building out a best-in-class approach to that. But yeah, I think as a business grows, like the internal comms of like how you're communicating, vision, culture, strategic decision making across the company is something that needs a lot of thought and a lot of intention behind. And I feel like we weren't, certainly at the start of this year, putting enough time and thinking of it through the lens of a process. I think it's hard to make communication into a process, but there's like fundamentals you can back it down into.
Yeah, agreed. I think one great example is that I always get really good feedback on is the sales huddles, like the pipeline huddles. Sorry, so like all brands out there and just sort of like the brands that we're looking to who are currently in the pipeline, like the whole team get super excited for the prospect of who they could maybe work with in a week's time or a few weeks' time. So that's like one area that's like, I know is like a real big standout. There'll be different ways to do that, of course, but it's just like a really good example of like how to get the team like really bought in and motivated, just excited for like what's to come. That like there's the opportunity and ability to work with the incredible brands that we're fortunate enough to work with. It's just one big example.
Yeah, I think to distill that down, it's like transparency. I think that's one thing we've become a lot more intentional with this year. Like it's owning when things are going wrong, right? And giving, getting people bought into the process of how we're going to improve or optimize, whatever that is. Because I think naturally as leaders, you have your blinkers on a lot of the time and you're just doing a lot behind the scenes that people don't actually see. So the more that you can be transparent with the whole team at every stage of that process, with full, things that we're optimizing, looking forward into the next 12 months, sales pipeline, all of these areas, and bringing the team into that I think just gets much more buy-in, doesn't it?
I think, yeah, you mentioned the sales example. We also obviously do the other side of that. Like we'll do the monthly recaps of wins, case studies, like champion. Each culture pillar will nominate, the team will nominate people who they think have displayed that, and we'll also do that for the mission statement, like the person who's really, we feel has been demonstrating that the most across that period through the work and the output the putting out. And I think that's really powerful, like a powerful example of recognition, but also again, it's reinforcing those culture pillars. It's keeping them central to every touch point, and it's making people very aware that if we can all demonstrate them across our daily workflows, our daily interactions with people internally and externally, we will achieve that mission statement. And I think it all does back down to that alignment to exactly who we want to be as a business and who we want the individuals that work within that business to be as, and what we want their character and ways of operating to look like.
Yeah, I think praise comes into that a lot. Like that's one thing you've really driven this year. I think, it's one thing expecting really high standards of a team, but that has to be married together with, platforming incredible work and alignment to those culture pillars. Like you have to reward people and empower people when they are doing great work and when they show alignment to those values. So even as simple as just having, the kudos Slack channel, but then on top of that, weekly shout outs across our, wider Slack channels for demonstration of great work and how you can tie that back to culture pillars. Because I think that's the narrative, that if you align to these values, that ladders up to growth, progression, business impact. So it's important that you shout that out.
I think every ecom, it would be interesting for everybody watching to try and take that and implement that into the business. I think there's a few quick wins in terms of shout outs and recognition. There's a few longer term pieces around really making sure that your vision and your culture is set with the right intention, and then bringing those two things together. Because I think we've seen it have a really transformative impact. Like from a feedback perspective, obviously we're doing client results, but it would be possible to pull up on a monthly, like a load of customer feedback of like how this product is transforming people's lives, and it builds conviction. And I feel like conviction is such an important thing in like belief that you are providing what you say that we are providing to the market. I think that would transcend to an e-com brand in a very similar way.
Yeah, I think you can reverse engineer values by looking at who in your team, who are the A players in your team, who are the killers that have grown within the business, the case studies almost, and reverse engineering what behaviors they have that have led them to be able to achieve what they have within that. And I think that really helped us through the process of setting those, because those behaviors, as we said, what then ladders up to the success. So yeah, that's definitely something to think through.
Yeah, I wanted to add as well, just like for people watching too, it's like, if it sounds like quite a lot, doesn't it? Like what we're going through, and like obviously you've got to be very intentional and like using the right wording and the messaging, and like it may feel like there's quite a bit of pressure to sort of like get that right, but like the main thing is it's like just showing the team that you care, and just like making sure that comes across. And I feel like we do a really good job at that.
Yeah,
100%.
Hey guys, very quick one. Our sponsors at Wayflyer are offering our listeners 25k in upfront capital for a 1.8k on the run up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, to give you a boost when you need it most. Imagine this, your ads are finally dialed in, CPAs are down, AOV is up, and you can feel the momentum building. But then you run into unexpected costs, which I'm sure we've all seen. Your ad budgets are nearly capped, and your next move, the one that could turn a good month into a fantastic month, depends on cash that isn't landing for another 2 weeks. This is how Wayflyer helped brands like Wild, True Classics, Dock and Bay, to name a few, achieve growth with funding when they actually need it. They're giving ambitious D2C brands $25,000 in upfront capital for $1,800 total cost in the run up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday. That's a 1.2% per month over 6 months. No equity, no hidden fees, just fuel to move when it matters most. So you can double down on what's working, scale your best performing ads while they're still pumping, stay stocked. As we know, stock can be an issue during this period. So reorder your fastest movers before they sell out, and move fast, right? Connect Shopify or Amazon and get approved in hours, not weeks. Timing is everything. Often the brands that win aren't the ones with the biggest balance sheets. They're agile and ready to act when the window opens. So go to the link in the description and get $25,000 in your account next week from the brand that helps you fund your favorite brands.
Obviously, we started that like process off the back of bringing in a CFO at the start of it early last year, who I think has helped us shape that approach to planning from a financial perspective. But then looking forward into next year, I think it would be interesting to touch on how we've maybe set a couple of core strategic objectives that is then shaping how we look at 2026 strategy and the process that we're working through right now, transparently, to make sure we set ourselves up for success and take the learnings that we've had this year forward and build upon that. Because I think it'll also be interesting for those watching because I think it's very applicable to every business, that approach.
Yeah, agreed. The way I've sort of like looked at this, tried to sort of like structure it is, I think obviously at the very start, like it's sort of shareholder objectives are sort of like set in terms of like the growth that is needed, like revenue, profitability, whatever that may be. That's sort of like one way to look at it and like one way to start it. So let's assume you sort of like set a particular sort of like revenue growth target based on what the shareholders are looking for just out of the business. Then it's a case of laddering that down into strategic objectives, like you say, Ollie. So it's the way I view these are like, it's just best to keep them as simple and as minimal of them as possible to ensure focus. So I'm talking like sort of 2 or 3 that can then be sort of like laddered throughout the whole organization, across all departments, across all functions, across all people. And you've got to look at it from like 2 ways as well. So like there's one way to look at it where you're looking at the past data and sort of like identifying, you know, the biggest areas of leverage that will drive that growth. There's only going to be a few that could possibly have that impact. So it's about identifying those based on KPIs that have been the case over the last sort of 12 months, where they fall and like how they are sort of benchmarked against peers as well, like across the industry. So you really know where the opportunity is. And then the other way to look at it is like looking ahead into 2026 and beyond. It's like marrying up where the industry's moving and where it's going and like where those trends, like obviously we've talked about AI so much on this podcast. It's like where the changes in the business model may come in and when that may be. It's not even a case of getting it exactly right. It's just making sure that we're sort of building towards that point. So that's how I look at it. And I think that's what's gone into our sort of strategic priorities. It's sort of like that backward view, where the biggest opportunities are, and then the forward view, sort of like matching it all together. So that's sort of like where we started.
You mentioned focus there. We should have mentioned that in the learnings as well. Like, I think that a lot of, I think Matt Kelly said it to me once, but I always remember the saying, it's like patient in the macro, impatient in the micro. Like great things just take time, more time than you think to achieve. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't try and like accelerate timelines where possible, but it is just a nature of building a great business. I think it takes more time than you think. And I think you only realize that through experience. And then also like really drilling down on doing less better has really contributed to our success this year, but I believe we'll continue next year. I think that view of the industry and where it's moving is also, I find it now more difficult than ever to think about strategy through the lens of industry progression, because I think more so than many brands, operate on the frontier of AI. Like AI is probably going to have a more of an impact on us initially as a business model than say an e-com brand. So looking at like how content is going to change, how these platforms, so many variables involved in that is just such a difficult thing to think through, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's definitely been the biggest challenge. Like video gen this year, AI video, we just didn't even think that was coming this year, but to the level it has to the point now where we're looking at hiring our first AI videographer. Like it's, I think like we're looking at it through the lens of expect it to come quicker than you think it's going to come. Almost like the timeline that you think something's going to happen in with AI, shave 6 months off that. It's what I've learned at least this year from my own predictions.
100%.
Agreed. I wanted to touch on like maybe tie into an example with us on like the strategic priorities. We've kind of touched on it just briefly now, but the goal of expanding our revenue through existing clients, which obviously comes with the prerequisite of being able to provide more value to clients, but that's a big strategic priority of ours and a big opportunity. And to sort of give context into that, that was sort of like from looking at past data and just sort of like identifying how we were achieving revenue growth as an agency over the last 12 months and probably beyond that. It's all through new business. And so you can sort of tie that to the e-com business model. It's like just relying on new customers is that sort of like the way to look at it. It's like not the sort of position you want to be in, or like it sort of highlights the area for growth that there is through like existing customers or existing revenue expansion. So that's sort of like an example of where we've looked back at previous data and set an initiative around that.
Yeah, we massively under indexed, and I think that's a lot largely because we're doing a lot of great marketing, and that doesn't mean that we have. I don't want people to hear that and think we have a normally high churn rate. It's just like we bring clients into the business on a model, on a package, and they stay with us for an extended period of time, but we don't ascend them through layers of value. And you can see that similar to how you'd bring a customer in on a product, but then they just continue to buy only that, or maybe they come back at a 6 to 12 months timeline. It's like, right, well, now how do we think about cross-selling them to another SKU, or how do we think about bringing that time to repeat purchase down, or just decreasing the churn rate on your customer base? It's like those are the levers to pull in increasing retention in an e-com brand. For us, it's like, how do we ascend clients up through selling them more services, through providing them more value? I think that's a huge opportunity for us, especially with where content is going into next year. But that alone is such a growth lever, and is why it's one of those two real strategic focuses.
Yeah, they say growth without retention is just churn with lipstick.
It's a good saying. I've never heard that one before.
Okay, so we've set our strategic layers or strategic pillars. How then are we, Matt, because you've very much led this process with obviously department head / C-suite, looking after, for myself, for example, Hammy Media, feeding into yourself on a group level. How then are we turning those strategic pillars into financial forecasting to then, management, buy-in, etc.?
Yeah. So the first step, I guess, is for, once the whole leadership team is aligned on the objectives, the growth rate that we want to achieve over the years, and as you say, Luke, it's a case of mapping it out in terms of a forecast, having leadership input on that forecast initially, to sort of like get that initial view. And then once we've sort of like got that view, we then want to get the senior management team involved, because ultimately, like, managers are there for a reason. It's because they're incredible at what they do, and they know how, for example, like expanding existing revenue, for example, is like a strategic objective like that they know what that means in their context, in their sense, like through their service and like what they need to do. So it's very much like on them to review the forecast initially, feedback on it, and then come with new ideas, I guess, or like alternative ways, or like objectives within their department, kind of like OKRs, for example, that ladder up to that strategic objective. And then once you get that buy-in, and like once they've sort of changed certain areas of their part of the forecast and thought through a lens of like, okay, yeah, over next year, how am I going to achieve this for my department and ultimately the business and the agency? And once they've done that, they get so bought in to the process, and sort of like visually seeing like how they're going to like implement that themselves, but then also like they're so bought into the numbers and believe they're realistic, they're achievable, and it's sort of just bought into that growth.
I think so. When we're going through that process, are we looking at it, when we're looking at the forecast? I guess say we've got that strategic objective, we've got like personnel changes that we need to make, in pursuit of that. And within an agency context, you've got obviously delivery personnel and non-delivery personnel. So I guess then it's how are we thinking through that from a forecasting perspective?
The way we like to view forecasts, the way that we approach it is sort of like revenue first, sort of like building out that revenue look, and then understanding what that means in terms of like how many clients, how's that client base going to grow over time, how's that like average order value or just the value of clients going to grow over time, and then from there you can then understand like, right, we're getting into the real nitty gritty now. It's like how many assets would we need to produce roughly to be able to provide that value to deliver to clients over the year, and then you then sort of like at a point where you know exactly sort of the amount of people that you need to then deliver on that without systems breaking or without service delivery suffering. And then it's about making sure that you map that out over the year. Like, okay, when are we going to jump to this next tier of client that's going to put the team over capacity? We want to hire 2 months before that, for example, to allow like a month training roadmap and then sort of familiarity or like shadowing, etc. So then it's doing that process, but like for every department, for every role, for every deliverable across the team.
I think one thing you did really well as well, like when I've been working on the Hamby forecast, it's setting constraints around like gross profit and EBITDA percentages, which helps then, give more ownership to say senior management when you're doing those full-time employee inputs that we need throughout the year, and how that then ladders back up to the revenue at the top. So that was really valuable, because obviously, as you said, you're looking at it through delivery and non-delivery, starting through that delivery lens. If we know we need to achieve 40-50% gross profit over the course of the 12 months, we're looking at the revenue and then reverse engineering the creative volume that I guess feeds into that and the people that we will need. So we know that by doing that, there may be a bit of, if we're trying to remain within certain constraints on gross profit and EBITDA, there may be a bit of adapting there based on the people that we need in the business versus being able to stay within those ranges.
Yeah, that's it. It's like making sure that managers and everyone who's involved in the forecast like has the tools, has the KPIs, the numbers that need to be stuck to, or there or thereabouts, to be able to work out how it's going to be executed. I think you made a really I know focus that on like purely delivery lens, I guess, but like looking at it from a non-delivery standpoint as well, it's like there's going to be team growth, there's going to be the number of delivery roles are going to increase, and obviously naturally that's going to include require non-delivery staff to support that, to make sure that the team are being trained up and we're hiring at the right times with the right people, and that the service itself is evolving as well. So it's then that'll be the sort of step after that. It's like, okay, what infrastructure? It's not just people as well. It's like what operations, what software, what sort of consultants potentially like do we need to be able to like sustain this level of growth. And there's a lot of nuances in there. There's a lot of that'll lead to a lot of questions. But yeah, that's sort of like the way to look at it. I think we've got a good pulse on that.
Yeah, I think that thinking through that lens of like strategy then becomes personnel, then becomes like projects. It's like that's like the hierarchy of thinking that I've tried to retain, because I always feel like whenever you're trying to do some sort of big strategic shift in a business, it can feel often, if you aren't intentional about thinking about that personnel that's going to own a lot of that, it falls on existing people whose capacity is already taken up by a myriad of different things. And I think that's then drives the hiring decisions we make, which then drives the projects that come off that as those individuals come into the business. So yeah, I think looking through the lens of that new business is that existing MRR piece, it's like that's leading to us bringing in a head of client success or head of client outcome, or whatever you want to call that role, into next year, with the view of them owning and driving that forward and reporting into us at a leadership level to ensure that's properly resourced. And I think it just requires a lot of intention and thought.
So we've set the forecast. Now it's about, turning that into KPIs and execution, which I guess execution, things like quarterly reviews, delivery, fall under. Talk us through then where once we've set that forecast and we've locked that off, what are we doing next in the process?
Yeah. So as part of that template, in that forecasting doc, there's like a tab that has KPIs in it. So that like really, and that dynamically updates. It sort of like links to the full P&L. So it like dynamically updates based on sort of like the numbers essentially. And what that sort of shows and what's important to get from this forecast for everyone listening is like the specific KPIs that are going to be owned by the specific people and like managers and other leaders in the team. So that's really important, like having that clarity and tying those KPIs to their roles, their function, and making sure there's like 2 maximum, I'd say, just for that focus.
It takes a lot of thought to sit down and work through a business and think about how managers' KPIs can ladder up to a P&L impact. And that's going to differ by company. In an e-com brand, it's like, how does a creative strategist KPIs ladder up to a new customer revenue outcome for the business? And that gives you a very tangible way to measure success for that individual, which we probably weren't doing enough of that at the start of last year. And I think that brings in that objectivity. I think it's really important to not just take what's in there and apply it. It's like really sit down and think about what those key things are, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's making sure that and leaning on the managers to like inform you like what those KPIs should be for, the delivery team, like within their teams. Because again, that's their expertise. That's where they're great at. So just leaning on them to feed that up and then agreeing and then like, tying it all in, as you say, Olly, because then it ladders up from forecast to the whole team and then from the whole team to the forecast.
I think there's a big part of keeping a team motivated and empowered is that knowing that the work they are doing is laddering up to business impact. And the more that you can, show that, the better. And as you say, it empowers people to, when they're having conversations about progression or salary growth, rather that conversation flipping from being, oh, here's my annual salary review, I want to be on this salary, to here's the business impact I've created, which justifies me being on this salary, which I think is empowering because it gives more ownership to the individual to be able to justify their own direction and future.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that clarity is key. And then, as you said, Loukas, there just at the end, like it's doing right by the people in the team, and like that will ultimately like being that sort of focused on a KPI and like knowing the laddering up to the business objectives, like having that commercial awareness and understanding is going to mean that you can progress a lot quicker in your job, in your role, and in your career ultimately. Yeah,
and I think that's been really exciting this year, where people have directly created business impact that has meant that that's led to growth there's faster growth for them in the business in a shorter time period, which is exciting because it's not as rigid as you have a salary review every 12 months or 24 months necessarily.
Yeah, agreed. There's certain mechanisms as well, isn't there? We've probably like made it sound quite easy or simple over the last sort of like couple of minutes, but like the mechanisms in place for accountability throughout the whole org. So it's like just going back to the sort of objectives and the KPIs from there, sort of laddering down to management. It's having that OKR structure, as you referenced at the start of the call, at the start of the episode, Loukas. Having that OKR structure so that the senior management team can like set those objectives that then ladder up to the strategic priorities and sort of like align with KPIs. So they then know what they're working on within the quarter, where they need to focus on. And then it's about having those direct report structures and meetings where you sort of like very intentional with what you discuss in that sort of like half an hour bi-weekly, just like one-to-one with manager and direct report, which is very tied to those OKRs. It's tied to the pacing of the KPIs, and it's just like getting that general update of where things are going this month versus target, where things are going, but obviously like still communicating as a human, attaching the emotional element to that as well, like what it means for the team, the impact that it's going to have on the individual, just like the team in general. Super important.
Yeah, one thing I've loved that you implemented this year that we didn't have last year, and I think it's meant that everyone is rowing in the same direction, is introducing quarterly themes that then that the objectives ladder up into. So it just means that there's we're all rowing in the same direction, and that we are working towards the same goals and objectives in a sense.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think that that's been instrumental in like our turning point of the year as well. I feel like a couple of those quarterly themes have been really, really key in the journey we've gone on as a company over Q3 and like now into Q4. And it just gives that clarity, doesn't it? It's not only like from a sort of looking at things purely commercially, it also informs like training sessions, huddles, how we communicate, how we tie in the values into all that. And it, as you say, just make sure we're kind of a corporate term, isn't it? But rowing in the right direction.
Yeah,
direction.
Yeah, a bit too corporate, that one. No, I agree. It's like the law. I just think it's like the law of accelerated returns as well. And like the idea of focus, like the more that you can get everyone focused in on something, the quicker you'll be able to achieve that. Let's maybe touch on like our quarterly review structure, which again has been something we've updated this year that I think has been really instrumental. And obviously KPIs, objectives, they all feed into these sessions. Let's maybe talk through that a moment and how those are structured.
Yeah, 100%. So I think they're broken down into like 3 or 4 core sections. First section is a general sort of well-being check, of course. So just introing with that, making sure that just generally like people are happy in their roles, and anything is sort of like flagged at that point. And then KPIs is sort of like the next layer down, or the next section, sorry. So again, like making sure that we've got that live view of like where the person's KPIs are sort of pacing in the month versus sort of target. So that's very important. And then the third section, which is like the biggest section, and we've sort of like changed this a little bit, is like the bulk of the review, I guess. You've got and this is where like the core values come in the mission statement. It's like we break down the review in sort of like, or this section into 4 core parts, or like the 4 core values that we have. We make it clear like what skills fall under those core values. So for radical curiosity, for example, it's sort of like technology and sort of like just researching on your own accord, that sort of thing, doing your own, just generally being curious. Then there's kind candor, which obviously communication skills fall under that. And then for each one of those core values, like the manager has to make, the team member makes notes initially before the quarterly review, because it's really important that they're self-aware to the fact of where they sort of fall into those core pillars, those core values, and where they believe their skill set's at. And we ask them to rate themselves out of 10, I guess, on sort of like that structure. And then the manager then makes review comments like similarly, and to sort of like, and what that does is kind of like that feedback loop, isn't it, that you were also mentioning, Lucas? It's like it makes it aligns expectations, because the team member has come with ideas on where they feel they fit and fall. Sometimes they may undervalue themselves, sometimes they may slightly overvalue. We've all done that from time to time. And then it's like it gives the manager like a really good basis for like just directing that, like just aligning expectations. If they've slightly undervalued themselves, and they can say that and just like make it clear, no, I feel like you've done this better than what you've said. These are examples. And then on the contrary, like if overvalued, it's just about aligning those. So that's sort of like the rough structure that we work towards. So it does capture that KPI element, and then the sort of like more qualitative and core value aspects.
Yeah, and then it goes obviously into progression as well at the end, because I think that's one of the biggest things. I think the best team retention is about obviously it's many different things, but I think one of the biggest reasons that people leave a business is because they don't see a clear line of where they can grow into. So being very transparent with like role progression frameworks that become very quantitative as to like, okay, if you're a creative strategist and you band 1, 2, 3, senior creative strategist, this, you know, you need to be scoring on average this to be able to achieve that. So it's very clear what they need to do to be able to grow within their role. And you know, we help them through that self-development to be able to get there. So what you were talking about there, the KPI scoring makes up 50% of the review. And then the culture pillar scores is the other 50%, which then creates a total score for that quarter, which then can be fed into, you know, how we work with them to progress them to the next level or band in their role.
Yeah, I think all of that, like the progression roadmaps or role progression roadmap, career progression roadmaps, and the scoring against culture pillars. Some people watching may feel that's like almost a bit uncomfortable to give people a rating against something like a criteria. But I feel like objectivity is a thing that is a very positive thing in the workplace. I feel like having a very objective view of what's needed to achieve the next level of progression, and maybe being able to self-analyze like what you're doing and maybe what you're not doing in relation to that. And I think that drives a lot of pace of growth from individuals, because I know from speaking to other people who I'm friends with, or who are in different workplaces, like I think that is something that's often lacking from a lot of startups and a lot of fast growing businesses is a real clear objective view of how do I actually progress, and therefore it can like lead to slower growth for individuals, or growth in areas that maybe aren't as important, even though growth is generally important. So I think that's just a huge unlock if you can get that into a management workflow. And then I also think intention, like management, like communication requires a lot of intention. Like we've probably all been guilty of turning up to like reviews with a team member historically and not doing enough intentional preparation. And I think I've again heard cases from friends and family members who have been in businesses where that has happened. It's like, it feels like that whole process is rushed, often from either one side or both sides. Like the employee isn't told to go and spend time preparing for that review and input into that session. They're just coming and being spoken at for 45 minutes. Or on the other side, the manager is rolling into that review without going and generating the right context from people who spend all of their time with that individual on a daily basis, where maybe they don't have as much oversight. So I think for those watching who are growing, who are in those roles in business, I think it's like really trying to be intentional with that preparation, because it'll drive just much better conversation, much better like empowerment, and team members will feel generally just better about that relationship. And I think a lot of progression is so many people say that like your manager is ultimately like your experience of a workplace as well.
Yeah.
And I've heard that again from people I'm friends with, where it's like the workplace can be amazing, the business can be amazing, but the manager that you report into can be not amazing, and it can completely drastically shift your experience of that role.
It's statistically the biggest reason why people leave their role, isn't it? Like above anything else, above anything monetary. It's
a tough thing to train. I'd actually like to touch on, like, you've done a lot of work with certain team members in the business over the last 12 months, like building them up into an amazing manager and progressing them from, say, delivery roles to leadership roles or management/leadership roles. And I feel like you've built a really intentional framework around that. How did you approach that?
Yeah, I think it's like how you would approach a bottleneck in a process. You would start with the areas of improvement and reverse engineer the inputs to improve on those in its simplest form. So I think one thing that I like to do is 360 feedback reviews to the team or the people that work closest with that individual, which is a good opportunity to get in some data on areas that the person is doing great at, what they're not doing so great at, and then obviously from my own experience and working with them, I'm able to reverse engineer essentially a roadmap that helps them get to the point of where we need to get them to with a very clear objective and timeline with SMART goals attached to that to get there. I think the other side of that is what you just said. It's like empowerment and intention. Like I think you have to get someone to the point. You can't just put something in front of them, a training roadmap, and let them go off. It's about empowering them to believe in themselves and that they can get to that point, and putting them in that mindset, and giving them the ownership to be able to go out and do that. So, and then on the intention side, it's obviously comes down to that roadmap, but it's that idea of document, demonstrate, duplicate, like everything that we need to work with them on in improving, making sure we have clear documentation, making sure they are shadowing you enough to demonstrate, so that you can demonstrate what best in class looks like, and then shadow them doing that and giving them the right feedback in an empowering and productive way that ladders them to the point where they're able to achieve that at that same level. And great management is very time consuming, but it's one of the most rewarding things. And it's I hate to compare it to this, but it's the same as like prompt engineering. The input that you put in equals the output that you get, and it's exactly the same with management. So I think it requires time, but then the return of that, and being able to see this person grow into an incredible leader within the business, and the business impact that will be created long term from that is definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, agree. I want to highlight one point of that, Loukas. It was like I guess self-awareness, and Olly, you've briefly touched on this as well. Like the self-awareness aspect is having self-awareness is a very underrated skill, really, isn't it? And because it very much goes into your own self-development and determines to what level you can reach as a person. And this 360 element of that process, or just getting the broader team members to give either feedback directly or anonymous, whatever people are most comfortable with doing, is a really big part of that. And I imagine a lot of key learnings come from that, and realization moments with the manager or the person who it's based on is huge.
100%. Because I think most of the time, the reason a lot of people don't like their managers, because the manager a lot of the time doesn't have that much context of their day to day, and it's secondhand information that's being passed to them. So it's really important that you're getting a full picture of that through the people that work closest with that individual.
And something that I wanted to wrap all this together, I guess, and captures what we've discussed over the last hour. It's we've run through the infrastructure essentially, and the systems in which we make sure that the direction of the business is then transcended across the whole team, and the sort of technical aspects, and then the sort of meetings and the structures that hold people accountable there. One thing that obviously all this relies on is great people in those roles, isn't it? And that's ultimately what it all comes down to. And because you can provide that environment, you can provide that infrastructure and the process, but ultimately great people are going to be the ones, you need great people to execute on it and be held accountable and make the whole process work. So I just thought that was also a good way of just sort of wrapping all this together. You can easily over process something, but if the over processing side isn't working, then I think that's just an important insight.
Yeah, it's the single biggest input, I think, there. I think all of the things there that we've built allow great people to progress faster, grow faster, which translates into better client outcomes, which translates into better growth for us as a business. But I also think a lot of those people, if you stripped a lot of that away, would still be able to progress in a similar fashion, maybe slightly slower, because they are just that great. And I feel like that's what we've got to as a business over the last 12 months, especially, is just an amazing cohort or collection of people who do just live and breathe what we're trying to build and achieve. And you can see that in the momentum that we're building, but also the work that's being produced for clients, which is 100% the best we've ever produced right now as a business. And I'm sure that's going to continue into next year for sure.
Yeah. It's like the two sides. There's great people who've been with us for years who have like progressed and like just developed at the same rate, if not higher than the business, which is amazing. And then there's also like the people who are wanting to work with us as a result of all the marketing that you guys are doing, the delivery, the service delivery that we're doing, the great results that we're generating. So it's like, yeah, it's all come together.
100%. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on. I think that made me think we need to do another episode with you just on hiring.
Yeah.
I think that would be quite a good one, because I know that's an area we've also really been intentional with dialing in over the last 6 to 12 months. But thank you so much for coming on. It's been long overdue. And where can people find you? If you on Twitter, LinkedIn?
LinkedIn. Nowhere else really. I don't really do other social media. But yeah, LinkedIn's the place.
Cool. Perfect. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe, give us a like, and we will see you on the next episode.
Cheers.